All right. Thanks for joining us today for the 51st SLiTHER. I am happy and honored to be joined by somebody I know fairly well, my wife, Leigh Nataro. She is a lecturer in the math department at Moravian University, which is just down the road. And she's been involved in math teaching for a number of years. We won't reveal a number, mostly at the high school level, but recently at the college level. And she's found lots of different things to be involved with. And one of them is with Desmos, which you may or may not be familiar with. Most people are probably familiar with it as an online graphing/scientific calculator, but there's a lot more to do with it. And she's just going to kind of dip our toes into some of the things you can do with Desmos here today. You might be familiar with some of this, or it might be totally new to you, but hopefully we'll learn. If you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt us at any point in time, or just drop them in the chat, and I'll do my best to keep things monitored. But with that, Leigh, I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I have put a link into the chat. So if you are here and want to try out this activity, it's a very short activity. It has a few screens here. And so I'll give you a moment to do that. But while you're trying out this activity, I do want to mention that this is something that we created just to show off some of the features of what is known as Desmos Classroom. So these are interactive activities that you can create yourself, or you can copy from others, and they are free for you to use. I actually use these activities that I create with my pre-calculus students, or I should say math for business students at Moravian University. We have an entrance ticket and an exit ticket each day. And I've also used them for creating virtual assessments, quizzes, and exams when we were using online classes during the COVID times. So I will give you a moment to try that out. You can see from the dashboard that I'm sharing that we have 4 students that have logged into this activity. And you might also notice that their names are anonymized here, which is a great feature because it allows us to focus on the student work as opposed to the individual student. But also if you mouse over the names, you can actually see who that student is, or you can turn the anonymizing off. I do want to point out that besides this summary page here, we can see individually how certain students are doing: an X showing that their answer was wrong, a check showing that their answer was correct. We could also focus a little bit on what did the students actually draw. We can click on an individual tile here to see how a specific student did, and we can mouse up and down here to see what other students have done as well. We can also give students feedback. There is an option here to give students feedback. And so you can just click on this and give them some specific feedback about how they did. And I just gave some feedback of nice work. Is there another way to solve this? Notice it says that it's unread by the student. And on the teacher dashboard, you can see that it's unread because of the green marking that is there. So you may be wondering, how did I actually get that code that you clicked on in the chat? You can see the code is up here at the top. And you would then just copy this code and share it with your students in a learning management platform, or possibly over Zoom like we just did here. But how do we actually get to this activity, and how do we actually even create this activity? So up here, I have what is known as an activity page. And so I would click on this activity page to get to the actual activity. So this is where you would actually create the activities. And you can see here that I've got the snapshot of the individual screens. And we also have what is known as the dashboard here. If I wanted to, I could create another single session code to give to another class. And if you have multiple classes, I recommend doing separate dashboards for your separate classes. But another thing you could do besides creating a single session code is you could assign it to a class. So this is actually what I do with my students is I assign it to a class so they have all of their activities for that class in a single dashboard. So all the different activities that we might do. And it's really easy to create a class. I have the option here to assign to different classes. I might assign this to my Math 191 class. And then there's a separate dashboard for that particular class. I can see there's 18 students already enrolled in that class, and nobody's actually started the activity, as opposed to this particular code we looked at. There are 4 students that are in this activity. So one of the things that you might want to know how to do is how to edit a particular activity. I'm actually going to click on the 3 dots up here. I say anytime there are 3 dots, there's great things happening behind those 3 vertical dots. And there's options here of what I could do. I could edit this activity if I find that there's an error in it, and we might take a look at how to do that. I can also share this activity. I'm going to do that right now. So there's a link that pops up. I'm going to copy that. And I'm just going to paste that into the chat right now so that if you want to, you can access this later on to play around with it. So that would give you your own copy of the activity. So let's take a look at what's going on in this activity. Oh, by the way, we could also manage editors. If I wanted to, I could make my husband an editor of this activity, and I could share it with him. It's not like a Google Doc, though, in that you can't be in there editing it at the same time. I'm not quite sure what would happen, but probably nothing good because it's not like a Google Doc. So just be aware of that. But probably good to have an editor to catch your typos and other things. But let's say that I wanted to edit this activity right now. I'm going to click on edit this activity just to show you how this works and what it is that you could do. So notice that we can add additional screens if we want, just by clicking on the plus sign and moving these around. If we don't want a particular screen, we can exit out. One thing that I will warn you about is it's not like a Google Doc. Again, you can't just undo something. So if after I click X on that, I'm like, oh no, I really wanted to have that, you can't get it back. So just be aware of that. Notice here, these are the screens that we've created. Creating this line of text here with the subscripts and the arrows, that did require a little bit of work, and Chip had to do some work for that. Chip, do you remember what it was that you used to do that, to create that?
Didn't we go into LaTeX or something? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we had to find a LaTeX editor to do that. You can also type stuff actually in the Desmos calculator and then copy and paste it, because that's also LaTeX. So you'd have to know a little bit of LaTeX to get that to work. But I will say that down here, this allows you to type math as well. So if you have the LaTeX and then highlight the type math, it'll change it to what you need it to be. Notice that there are other options under here. Maybe you have you want to randomize the choices. That's an option. You can convert things to checkboxes. So maybe there's more than one answer. Notice underneath here, there's other things that you can check off. You can ask students to explain their answer. You can also have students see other classmates' responses. Maybe that's something that you don't want to have happen, so you could uncheck that. And maybe you just want to have the right answer and not have students explain their thinking. You could uncheck that as well. Notice that this is selected as the right answer. If one of the other answers was the right answer, you'd want to make sure you change it to that answer. Also over here, we have teacher tips. You could actually make a note to yourself as to what the right answer is, and maybe some other notes about what you want to see in the student responses. Moving on to the next screen here, you can see that we have an image that we've inserted here. Notice that you can allow full screen. If you did not allow full screen, this is what it would look like for the students, right? We can't make this larger, but notice if we allow full screen, that allows it to be larger for the student. They can just click on that to enlarge that. I will say one other thing about this. When we actually looked at the teacher dashboard for this, you might have noticed there was a difference between this screen, where a student might just type in the answer and get no feedback, and this next screen where a student might type in the answer and get some feedback, right? This one's saying check your sig figs, and now this is saying that it's correct. Notice up here we can also check for correctness. and that changes. Notice there's an X in the top left here if it's wrong, and a check if it's correct. But on this previous screen, there was not a check for correctness. So to have that work, we had to do a little bit of work, which is known as the computation layer. And so you can see that there's something here in green that allows you to create that computation layer and enter that correct response. So there's a little bit of coding that's involved. But my recommendation is to find other activities that have this coding and see how they work and modify them. Notice that I've got response.latex here, and this was called response. So it's referencing this particular component. Down here, we're creating feedback based on the student answer. And so we had to do a little bit of work with this. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So notice that we're giving feedback depending on what the student enters. 2 different responses where we want them to check their sig figs. Another one where we say, that's correct, nice work. And then if the answer is different than 74.10, that's going to give them a, this is not correct, try again. Otherwise, there's no answer that's shown. If they just leave it blank, there's going to be no feedback that's given to them. So once again, that's under this green area right here, this edit the computation layer. And we also have the option to have students draw on their screen as well. So how do we add these components? It's pretty easy to add these components. So we're going to add a screen here. And let's say that we want to add a component with some directions. We can put directions across the top here, or we can put directions within a note. I don't know, what kind of chemistry question would you want your students to answer? I am not as much of a chemistry enthusiast as my husband and all you Viper people. What would be a good question for me to type in here? Chip, give me a question.
How complicated do you want it to be?
Not too complicated, something where I don't have to worry about the LaTeX.
Let's ask how many moles there are in 7.5 grams of NaCl.
Okay, 7.5 grams of NaCl.
Yep.
Okay. So once again, we're going to preview this, and this is great. We've got the question, but we don't have a place for the students to put their answer. So there are options for where they could put their answer. They can put their answer in a text box. And once again, you have the option to show the classmates' responses or not. And so this is where you could put a text box. There are also options for students to upload audio, enter equations, or even upload an image if they wish within that text box. But it might be that instead of a text box, we want them to enter a number, numerical value. I did notice that some people like to have the units already on their answer. So what would be the units for this?
Moles.
Moles. So over here, I can say suffix and type moles there. And notice, let me make this a little bit bigger. There's an error message popping up, which tells you, okay, this isn't going to quite work the way you want, so I need to finish that out with another quote. And then that warning symbol disappears. There is information here about how to use these various sinks and sources for doing computation layer. And there's documentation and examples that are there as well. So now notice that when we click on preview here, we can see that the word moles pops up as students start to type that in. There is a keyboard option here, which allows them to do calculations down here, but they can also do calculations within the calculator if you've enabled the scientific calculator. And the nice thing about the scientific calculator is you can actually see what students typed in. They leave the activity, they've signed out, you go in and look at their work, you can see what they're actually typing in to their scientific calculator if you have that enabled. One other thing that I'll show you is how you can copy a screen from another activity. So let's say that you like this particular screen right here. You want this particular question. You found it in another activity. You don't want to recreate the whole thing. So we're just going to copy and paste it. So up here in the top left-hand corner, we can copy this screen. And it says copy, now paste into Activity Builder. So I'm going to go back to the activity that I was in. And I'm just going to do a Command V on my computer screen, and it just pops right in there. Notice that there's definitely some computation layer that's going on here, and you can click on each of these to see what's going on. There's also some computation layer on this one because for some reason, the person that created this one wanted people to have to like click on that before going in there. I don't want that. It's over here. I'm going to get rid of it. So now it goes straight there. So let's say we're done and we are ready to publish this. We can save a draft as we go, or we can click on publish. So I'm just going to click on publish here. And this is the activity that I've created and I've edited. This is a different version. Notice down here, it says dashboard below for earlier versions of this activity. So that's one other warning that I want to give you is that let's say that you've created an activity and you realize, oh no, some numbers are in this are wrong. The students aren't going to get the right answer. This is not what I want. And you've already created the activity code and students are already into the activity. Well, that's going to be a problem. You can't go in and edit it real time. You'd have to go in, edit the activity and create a new code to share with the students because the code is specific to a version of the activity. One thing I will say that you could do is let's say you realize, oh no, this is the wrong screen. I don't want this. And you realize that before the students get there, you could actually hide that screen. And so then the screens are renumbered and the students won't see that screen that was messed up. Later on, you can unhide it. Two other things I'm going to point out is one, you can pause an activity. And so right now, if you were actually in this activity, it would say activity paused on your screen and students wouldn't be able to actually do any more questions because occasionally you might see, oh, we need to address something here before the students continue on with their work. I need to give like a little mini reminder about something. Maybe it's about significant figures. And then you can unpause it. The other thing you can do is you can pace an activity. So let's say that screens 1 and 2 are for today and screens 3 and 4 are for the next class. We can paste this. So you can say restrict to those screens, and then you can add more screens as you want or edit to only be on certain screens. All right. Let's see. One other thing is you want to make sure you have a teacher.desmos.com account. So you can definitely sign up for that so that you can have access to all these materials. And if you want, you can share the dashboard with somebody so that if you have a teaching assistant or somebody else in your class, you can share the dashboard with them. And then I've just invited Chip to view that dashboard. So that's about all I had to share. That was a really quick version, but I do want to point out that there's some resources here. There's some collections with activities that have been created by others, a little bit more about editing activities, and a little bit more about how to use the teacher dashboard. I would definitely recommend looking at how to use the teacher dashboard if you're interested in doing something called snapshots, where you can take samples of student work to display in the front of the classroom. So I don't know what questions people have. I went through that really fast.
There was a lot to cover. I understand that. Just so everyone is aware, you know, you don't need to copy these right here and now. We will eventually make this a learning object on Viper. All the links will be in it, so you'll be able to access that. I pulled out these two chemistry collections in a quick look through things. I have not used Desmos yet, but I am getting interested in it. They are definitely a Gen Chemie kind of level, high school level sort of thing, but they're pretty cool. And something I'm strongly thinking about incorporating into my classroom this fall. But with that, I've talked enough. Are there any questions out there? Anything we can go over in a little bit more detail or you'd like to think about, discuss?
I do want to point out that also linked to the Viper website will be this handbook, 15-page handbook that I've created, which talks about how to create your own activities, run your own activities. There's some other things that I did not go over. There's something called polygraphs and card sorts. and also how to organize your activities. Because once you get many activities, of course, you want to have them organized maybe by class or by unit. I'll just show you on mine here. I have a couple different collections. So these are my collections. These are collections I've added from others. But I have a collection down here for my Math 107 class, my Math 108 class, my Math 120 class, and it has just different activities that I've created. Some of these are organized internally better than others, but you can even remove ones that are old. You can, or even share the collection as well, and manage editors. So there's options there to get that to other people.
So I'm muted. Go for it.
Yeah.
So I went through before we started a couple hours prior, and I did it anonymously, and it doesn't look like my answers made it into your dashboard.
So remember that discussion about, if a typo happens, we have to update it and it becomes a new sort of activity. Yeah, we discovered we had a typo in our answer key. And,
okay.
Yes.
So
So that's probably why I couldn't get number 3 correct. It kept telling me 74.10 was wrong.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let me show you where you could find that. All right. So I can show you that, yes, what you did type did show up. If I go to dashboard history, I can see like these are all the different activities that I've done. I probably should archive some of them. But this is, let's see, do I even have that old dashboard? Yeah, right here. This is the one that was not quite
Yeah,
correct.
there I am, Turb. That's
Yep. Yeah. So this was telling you that this was not correct. And it was showing up here as not correct. But I could tell you, actually, you are correct if I wanted to. Notice down here, though, it says that you're not signed in will lose access to the feedback if you leave the activity. So when you start an activity, it asks you to sign in or not sign in. If a student signs in using like their university email to sign in, is the recommended thing that they should be doing, then they'll have access to all the feedback that you might give them and all the activities. Otherwise, this feedback will be lost when the person closes that tab on their browser. Like it'll be
which
lost,
I have.
right? I will see it as an instructor, but it would be lost to the student.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the anonymized version still does work just fine.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So your mathematician name would be Charles Lewis.
Or I should say not signed in way.
Yeah.
As I suspect many students will want to do.
Yeah, it's much better for them to sign in because then basically anytime you create an activity code and assign it to your class, it's going to pop up on their dashboard. The other thing I would say, because I usually create an activity for an entire unit, and then, so it might last like 3 weeks, and I pace it to the very beginning and pause it until we're actually ready to use it, because I don't really want them working on it until we've actually had the class on that material.
Yeah, this feels kind of similar to Poll Everywhere, just maybe more user-friendly, maybe. I'm not familiar with either of these enough to make that call.
There's definitely, I feel like, more that you can do in terms of, images are really easy to import. Let me just go back.
I haven't figured out how to let them draw at me in Poll Everywhere, which is nice here.
Yeah, you can definitely draw here. They even have the option of, let me go back here and edit this just so that you can see. Right, you can add a drawing space for them to sketch. You could even change the background to have it be a custom image. So like if you had something that you wanted them to draw on, like give them, I don't know, a partial structure and you want them to add to the structure, you could, add the image here and then they can still draw on it. So you can customize the background. And you can even add a note off to the side here with directions for them. You can organize this in whatever way you want. And then if you're like, oh, I don't want them to actually be able to, I'd rather have them just draw with lines. I don't want them to have the pencil because that's kind of hard to work with. You could have it so that only lines would show up. And so there's not an option for text or other things.
That could be great for catalytic cycles or something like that. Just have the cycle there, and then they can label what each step is, or pick out a
Mhm.
piece and draw something off to the side.
Yep. And
That
then
could be cool.
yeah, and if you want, you can have the text box there as well, because then with the text box, they can type in things as well,
Mhm.
that sort of thing.
Which would work with your catalytic cycle idea really, really
Yeah.
nicely. Just
Where's the oxidative addition?
yeah,
Type that in.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yep. The other thing too, you could even have possibly directions about changing the color of the text or the color of what they're writing, so that maybe you want them to do certain things in blue and other things in red or something like that.
Jesus. All right. That's a lot of
And
control there. Okay.
and the good news is I feel like more and more students are using this in their classes, in their high school classes, so they're already familiar with this as a tool.
Okay.
So there's not really a large learning curve for the students at all.
Yeah, I could check in with some high school instructors and see if they are using it. Maybe this will be a good way to go if they already know it.
Just calculator use, I'm seeing students more and more pulling up Desmos as their calculator. Like in my research lab right now, that's what they use. The handheld calculators are sitting there unmoved, and they're just using Desmos.
Yeah, this is the scientific version of the calculator. But yeah, lots of students are using that.
Yeah, go for it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I wonder, is it possible to incorporate the Desmo activity page into the learning sites such as Canvas? So usually we rely on one platform. Is it possible to incorporate into the one Canvas page so students don't have to remember we have to click multiple sites?
Right.
Well, this would be a question.
Yep. So what I would recommend doing, let me see, let me go back here, back to my dashboard. So let's say it's the beginning of the semester, I'm going to create a new class. All right. I'm going to create a new class. I should probably archive these from last semester, but I'm going to add a new class and I'm going to call it, I don't know, Chem 101. All right. And you could call it Chem 101A, Chem 101B, whatever you want. If you need to go back and edit the name of that, it's really easy to do. You can have co-teachers added to it. But basically, this is what you would then put on your Canvas page, right? So at the beginning of the semester, you copy this there. The students could actually, I'm going to even put this in the chat so you can see how easy this is. So right now you are going to join my Chem 101 class. Right now there's no students, but if you click on that link, it should allow you to join that class. And initially here, I could have it set up so that I don't have to review students, but I kind of like to review who's being added to my class just to make sure it's somebody I know. So I can approve, or could have said approve all. And from now on, if they go back click on that link in Canvas, it'll take them to all the activities. So they've done that once, you've approved them all. They just have to go back to that link in Canvas. So you can just have like a page in Canvas that says Desmos activities, click here or something like that, and they would get in there just by clicking on that link. And right now there's no assigned activities, but once again, I could assign that activity that we were looking at a moment ago. This particular activity. I can assign this to the Chem 101 class. And so right now I can see there's 0 of 2 students, but I can see that they're both listed there, right? They're already in the dashboard. And so this is kind of nice too, because you can see like which students are actually started the activity. Like, oh, I can see who's here today in class and who's not by just looking at this activity, assuming that they're not trying to do it, somewhere else on campus.
I'm anticipating have a classroom size of about 60.
That's not a problem. I've seen.
So it does scale up pretty high?
It does scale up. Yeah, I've been at conferences with teachers and have been in a large room in a convention center, and I've seen up to like 300 people being in it. It gets a little laggy at 300, but that would probably be expected. And definitely it's a reliable platform. I think in my, oh gosh, 6 years of using this platform, I think I've had issues one time maybe. So I would say reliability is very high. So don't know if there's any other questions. I think it's really just a matter of playing around with it yourself, and trying things out. And once again, this is a good resource for the different things that you can do. And there's also tips and tricks within this document as well.
And that will be part of the learning object that goes on to Viper here. So it'll be accessible to everyone. And I think the nice thing that kind of, like the Viper model, the materials are all share and share alike. So I think if I'm going to do this, I'm going to borrow heavily from the existing materials out there, which I do have some fears that maybe my students have already seen them in high school, but we'll see. I'll probably make some modifications, but start small, make small changes and grow from there. But it's nice there's stuff out there. And I certainly would, from the Viper side of things, certainly think if people wanted to publish on Viper saying, hey, I've created this collection, we could do that as a web app sort of thing. It might be nice to have that kind of thing available to folks who might not think to look at it through Desmos.
And you can even create collections within collections. So let's say you're creating your own Chem 101 activities, but then you find, oh, somebody else has a Chem 101 collection out there. You can add their collection to your collection. So you can create collections within collections. All
right. Well, I think first I have to take care of the legalese and say that, IONiC Viper does not necessarily support or recommend any particular product or application, but this does definitely go along with our vision of making things accessible to all students. So definitely a very, very nice feature. Something I really want to be thinking about. One of the reasons we still use a textbook of some form in general chemistry is the online homework system. I don't know that this is quite there yet, but it's a potential route into it. That's something I would be very interested and passionate about, is going to totally open access kind of materials in our Gen Chem, and we're just not comfortable doing that as a department yet. So anything that gets us a step closer is a good thing. But with that, thank you all for attending and some great questions and things for us to think about. Thank you very much, Leigh, for spending a little time with us and going outside your comfort zone a little bit, talking to some chemists about some of the things we can do here. You gave us a lot to think about, and thank you for sharing your materials with us that will be accessible by everyone.